Right, we're going to chat about Congress. Here's a shortened version of Donegal Chairman Mick McGrath and former GAA President Sean Kelly on yesterday's OTB AM.
You have difficulty with where the motion was divisive, was that it?
Well, that type of wording was done, but people use words in their defence. Like, I mean, we're big boys and it's a big world. We accept that, we're big boys. It was probably some of the words that was used by Sean Kelly that were, you know, if there was any divisiveness, it came from him, not from us. And we would have had a good enough relationship with him down through the years. And we weren't looking for any favourism from anybody. We were only looking for one word: fairness. We don't feel that there's fairness in the motion at the moment, the way it stands. And that's why we brought it to Congress. But to say that we were negative, you know, it was an addressing that the people from Donegal are negative. And we're far from negative. And we at no stage are afraid or concerned about playing Dublin and Croke Park.
I want to put something to you straight off the bat here. Mick McGrath said that he hoped that you would withdraw the word negative to describe the Donegal motion, and I've got to put that to you straight off the bat. Are you willing to withdraw the notion that it was a negative comment?
No, I'm not. I just commented practically on the wording of the motion. It was written in negative sense because it said no county could nominate Croke Park as their home venue. That's a negative. That's what I was talking about.
Is that not a little bit semantic, Sean? Is that not a bit of a fig leaf for the people who voted against this, when ultimately what this means is that next year the competition will not be a fair competition? Dublin will have 2 home games in the Super 8, which gives them an unfair advantage against everybody else.
Yeah, but I suppose Croke Park has to be located in some county. It is located in Dublin, thankfully. Dublin can attract big numbers to the matches, and the games are played there. But I think if it was worded differently, of which would make a big difference, would be, for instance, if they said that Dublin could play their home game in Croke Park, but the final game would be played in a neutral venue, then that would change the situation completely. Or, as I said, maybe we should look at playing one game at home, one game away, and toss for the final one. And then if they were to meet again subsequently in other years, that the team that was away would be at home the next time.
Do you buy that, Anthony?
Do I buy that? No, really. Listen, I was at Congress last year, and to say it is a... you kind of have to be... Have you ever been?
No. I haven't had the pleasure, no. I probably would have gone if I was around at the weekend, to be honest, but just kind of see how it operates, because there is a mystique around Congress. Yeah, there's a mystique around it.
I was actually interested to see exactly as you say how it operates, and it's very much. I got the feeling that this is a lot of people's All Ireland. You know, it is their weekend, where there's a sense of responsibility and a sense of power and a sense of... But there's just so much stuff going on behind the scenes and so much stuff going on in the build-up to it, which is actually very evident by a lot of kind of nearly structured things that happen and kind of nearly set things that happen, that you're kind of going, oh, I wonder why that individual is talking on this particular motion, but then you're kind of like, oh, now I see why that's going on. So there's a lot of nearly kind of things that are put in place. Obviously, people who are asked to speak on certain motions, which is fine, but there's definitely a serious amount of work that goes on behind the scenes to manoeuvre certain things in certain ways. Like, I don't know how many of the actual motions that were tabled by the top table got through, but I think it was practically all of them. I think it was. It nearly is every year. And they get through by like 90-odd%, you know, just straight away. If you bring anything, or if a club brings anything to it, or something like the GPA, or, you know, even ourselves, when we tried to get it through the CPA, we tried to get it through various clubs for, especially last year, the transparency motion, which I think is the most ridiculously obvious thing to get. Never mind everything else. If you can't actually stand by and say, well, we want to see how everyone has voted. So if Owen has been mandated by Kerry to vote in this way, did he actually go and vote in that way? Like that's as I said last year, that is the very, very basic requirement that you would think in a democratic situation, and that didn't go through. So what chances have you got really to know who votes what way? Some fella changed his mind, and he might say, oh well, I listen to people argue over the 24 hours before the vote. Yeah, but hold on a second, you were still mandated to vote, and even if you did change your mind, well, at least go back to your county and tell them that you changed your mind, and then stand up for the fact that you did change your mind, and argue the point then to your representatives and to your clubs who actually mandated you in a certain way. It's extremely frustrating. It again seems to be that, whatever is being dictated to, well, then that passes and the rest just kind of falls by the wayside. And, you get a situation there like Sean Kelly. Like, that's a come down, he either thinks it is or it isn't, but don't say, oh, well, if you change the wording of it. Well, why wasn't there advice given then to change the wording of it? So by virtue of him saying, well, if you change the wording of it, he still thinks it's unfair. But he didn't, that wasn't his first point. It wasn't about fairness. His first point was, sure, Croke Park's in Dublin and that's where the games have to be played. So what is it about? Like, let's be straight about this. It's about the revenue. That is it. Like, I'd actually rather if someone came out and said, it's about the revenue, fellas. Because
that's the thing, because there is a nub of truth in that revenue is needed, but ultimately the problem a lot of people have is just that that's not being given as the reason.
Exactly. But again, it's like the Porky Queef situation. Like, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. The thing that gets people so annoyed and so upset and frustrated about certain aspects of the GAA and how it's actually run is this kind of nearly like treating you like an EGIT, there's this cloak and dagger stuff. Instead of actually coming out and saying, well, actually, I tell you what, it is about the revenue because Dublin will probably play whomever. They'll attract maybe 50 or 60,000 people into it, and that revenue then gets, dissipated throughout the clubs in this manner. So people can actually say, oh, A to B to C, well, that's actually okay. So that's a good reason to have it, albeit it is a bit unfair on Donegal or Galway or whoever it may be, but at least the whole lot, the actual, the game itself is improving underneath because of the revenue being dissipated, as they say. But when you kind of go, oh no, well, it's just because of, we don't see it at all about the revenue, it's about because there's crowds or whatever it is, some of the stuff that's just being bandied about, that's where people get really frustrated. And that's where people get annoyed at this kind of excuses that are put up without actually being completely truthful about it. Yeah,
like it seems that there would have been a much better chance of the Donegal motion of passing if it wasn't a Donegal motion, but say a Central Council motion.
Oh, 100%. Like, if it was, but that's when you have a situation there. Like, John Costello stands up and says what he said, and as soon as he kind of brings that emotive language into it, about being divisive, about being, kind of mean-spirited, straight away, that takes the eye away from the basic facts of the thing to an emotive thing now, that, Donegal are, sure, they're jealous of Dublin's, superiority over there. Donegal, we're not saying anything like that. They weren't, if there's jealousy there, or maybe there is in a small sense, but so is the rest of the country. It was about the basic fact of, especially the Donegal situation, where it was an unfair situation. It was unfair. And someone else is going to find themselves in the exact same situation this year and next year and the year after if it doesn't change.
I do want to ask you about the CPA element of Congress at the weekend. Yeah. There was a 20-minute fixture presentation. I saw, I think it was the CPA account on Twitter, or was this Micheál Briotti actually saying that there wasn't actually a great old take-up and actually watching this at a couple of delegates left the room and things like that? Yeah,
Micheál was there with Joan Keogh. The two of them were invited to it, and I think there was a 20-minute odd presentation. About 50 or 60 odd people just left the room to relieve themselves or go for a pint or whatever it was, obviously maybe feeling that there was no votes going to take part in this thing, or maybe that it just wasn't important enough. Now personally, now you would think I would say this being part of the Club Player Association, but I would have thought that this would be a very important debate to have. Much more so, by the way, than a 15-minute debate that went on about when is the actual right time to send in an email. Is it 8 o'clock on a Monday morning, or 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, or 9:30 on a Monday morning when the school's open, which, by the way, did occur. So there's lots of different stuff that goes on. a bit disappointed, and I suppose we'll be looking for clarification from the Uachtarán's the speech which happened.
Yeah, the quote that kind of jumped out was that he wanted the Club Players Association to submit a more detailed sample of how they propose to fill the blank canvas and fixtures, which they talk about to further enhance debate on the challenge around fixtures. We want solutions.
Yeah, so do we. You know, like, I mean, what we've been asking for since day one was a blank canvas to actually sit down with everyone, including the GPA, you know, all the stakeholders to actually sit down and say, okay, let's try and sort this out once and for all. Like, I mean, we've come with reams of suggestions. You know, you have a situation where we've brought 3 different plans, you know, over the years. So you've Liam Griffin and his team have brought them. Derek Kavanagh along with them have brought. But you know, there's always going to be holes picked in these things. But again, this is the type of thing where you come with something, someone say, "Oh, that doesn't work." We're not talking about that. The quote that Liam would have always said, "It's not our plan, or it's not what we think is right." You know, it's what is right for everyone. So to come out on that, I thought was a little bit disingenuous, very strange, because, you know, behind the scenes, we've had some really good meetings with both Tom Ryan and John Horan.
When was the last time you met with them?
Members of the executive have met like only in the last number of weeks. You know, there's been 2 to 3 really good meetings even since the start of the year, in the sense of trying to move this thing forward and hopefully get an association or a committee set up to actually really finally have a look at this. You know, now, I think that's still in the pipeline, and we would hope it is very much so in the pipeline. But you know, I just think that maybe, you know, I know it was a predetermined speech that he was making, but maybe he just made a mistake with regard to the language used, because I find it, again, as I say, and we would find it a bit disingenuous to think that we need to come with solutions. It was never about that. We're saying, listen, you could come with a solution, I could come with a solution, but it's not about our solution. It's about everyone sitting down and saying, okay, between all the stakeholders, as I said, the CCCC, the GPA, ourselves, whoever else, doesn't even matter. You need to get, obviously, you know, an agreement between everyone of how to progress this.
And like the first question is, like, how far away are we from that agreement? Like, have those meetings come close to kind of one similar solution? But also, how do you then make that work? Is it then that Central Council actually just takes control of the CPA idea, perhaps, and takes it to the next Congress because they've got the best chance of actually getting it through? Yeah,
hopefully. You know, whatever. I think, like anything, if we're brainstorming and we do it over a weekend or whatever it may be, you get, as I say, all the people in the room that actually will make a difference. You get maybe some people who are completely alien to the whole process to actually give a very independent view of it. But you come to a form of solution and you back it and you say, right, this is the way we're going to go. And then you would hope that, yes, it would be something that it would be brought by the top table. Because as I said to you, if it isn't at the top table, it very rarely gets in. Yeah. So the top table will have to obviously rubber stamp it and say, yes, this is something that we think is worth going for.
Cahair O'Kane of the Irish News is listening in this morning. Good morning to you, Cahair. How are things?
Morning, lads. Well, yourselves?
Good, thanks. We'll get into the weekend's football, but I just want to get your quick take on Congress on Saturday. Obviously, the Donegal motion falling flat. A lot of us maybe were a bit naive thinking this thing would actually go through, because it seemed to me that it would help the fairness of the competition. What's your take on this falling flat and whether or not it should have got through?
My take is, thank God I wasn't at Congress. The place is just, look, as a democratic body, it has become a complete shambles. It bears no resemblance to the public opinion. And ultimately, the idea of a democratic body is that that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to reflect public opinion. Ultimately, the delegates that are going there to vote should be mandated. There shouldn't even be a need for Congress, you know, because they should be mandated by their clubs. The county boards could easily send off their votes on each motion to Croke Park. They could be counted up and everything could be sorted without the wicket. You know, the idea of having debate on the floor of Congress is, you know, it's wrong, because everybody should be going there already knowing what way they're going to vote on each motion, because they should have a mandate on what way they're going to vote. But as Anthony alluded to there, the transparency motion that was blown out of the water last year, I think it was 83% voted against it. To me, I think Congress completely lost all credibility at that point. The fact that such an overwhelming majority of the body of delegates voted against transparency in their own voting, it is just unbelievable. So there was no surprise, absolutely no surprise, that the Donegal motion went down. I think one motion from a club or county, and it was a fairly meaningless one, went through. And as Anthony said, almost everything from from the top table did. So that's what it is.
I've kind of forgotten how healthily that transparency motion was actually defeated last year, Cahair. It's like we often kind of question when anything comes in the way of reform. The next question obviously is, how is this thing going to get through Congress? And it seems there's a couple of ways to do it, but maybe the question we should actually be asking, Cahair, is Congress fit for purpose?
No, it's not. It's not. I wrote about this on Monday, that it can't be deemed fit for purpose anymore, because it's not doing what it's supposed to do, and that's reflect the views of clubs and counties and everybody. You know, the delegates are going off their own bats. You know, they're not signing up to transparency and how they're voting. God knows how anybody is voting. But, you know, on the Donegal motion, it was very clear that, as Anthony said, the financial consideration was put in front of the money, or sorry, I'm put in front of the games. Sorry, I've got a wee visitor here again, the McKinley. but the money was put in front of the games themselves, and it was just, you know, it was totally unsurprising that it happened. But you could be sure that if the voting was transparent, that, you know, that East Leinster belt that is under that coaching project, you could be sure that almost every one of those voted in favour of keeping Dublin and Croke Park because of the financial consideration that they had. You know, the integrity of the GAA's flagship competition, it had to come first in that decision. It just had to come first, and it clearly didn't. And that is where the body, you know, that's where Congress falls down. I think it falls down completely on that argument.
I think more and more, Cara, as you say, you know, and you go back to the transparency one last year, I think more and more county boards or people involved at the grassroots are going to become more and more emboldened by getting motions put up which are going to expose things more and more. Like, that is another one now, you know, and again you can try to kind of, you know, pass it off and say, oh well, this was going on and we have to consider the support base and you have to consider the fans and Dublin and all that. But it was a basic question. When you really boil it down, it was a basic question of fairness. The year before was a basic question of just transparency and democracy. And if you go, as Carr says, there is no... People were arguing, saying, but I should be allowed to change my mind. No, you shouldn't be allowed to change your mind. You've been mandated by every single person, shall we say, in your county to go and actually vote in a certain way. Why should you just decide that when you get there, because someone taps you on the shoulder and says X, that you say, actually, do you know what? You're right, that's a great idea. But if you do change your mind, go back then and stand in front of your county board and say, actually, I changed my mind. And that's why, as you can see, in a transparent situation, I changed my mind. I was meant to vote yes, I voted no, and here's my resignation.
The ironic thing, of course, is that if you don't want transparency, it's easy if you know you're one of 83%. It's like, well, you know, you can't really pick the needle from the haystack there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's...
But I think, you know, as Carl said, you may get, and this is really the only hope, but it's a very sad situation that if you continue to expose the underbelly, shall we say, of what's actually happening, because I think people are either going to get completely disillusioned, which is happening more and more. I can even hear in Carr there, you know, he's frustrated. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I would never go again. Like, I left there last year and said to myself, there is absolutely no point. If we thought we had a motion and we thought, listen, because last year we said, let's do this to the nth degree. Let's do this absolutely the way you would bring every motion to it. We got someone to draft it up. Because by the way, even the language used around it is unbelievable. Like, I mean, it has to be in a certain specific manner, and then you have to go through a certain process to even get it on the floor. That in itself, by the way, is an arduous process. But when you do all of that, then it can just be kicked out. And by the way, you don't know who has voted which way.
It seems like there's a bit of PTSD for Congress goers. You're saying that you'll never go again. Did you see that Fire Festival documentary on Netflix a couple weeks ago?
No,
it's like people saying I'll never go to that festival again. It's kind of reminiscent of you talking about
I'm there
Congress.
Next year, knocking on the door, ready to go in.
We should talk about some of the stuff that's gone on the pitch over the past couple of days. Cahair, just your take first on an incredible result for Fermanagh really at the weekend against Donegal. I'm sure for somebody who's kind of watched them over the past couple of weeks, I'm not sure how surprised you were by this result first of all, but it's certainly showing a progress Rory Gallagher is bringing on the results front.
I was surprised. I think everybody was surprised, to be fair. Like, to be honest, when Fermanagh went up, and I suppose that's been the way for them, and they've maybe used that. You know, last year when Rory Gallagher came in, people were sort of thinking they'd do well, consolidate their position in Division 3. They ended up promoted and ended up beating the Armagh side that they went up along with in the championship, beating Monaghan in the championship. And I suppose it fell down then in the Ulster final, and I suppose people were looking at that. And then you had the winter where they lost Seamus Quigley, they lost Tomás Corrigan. You know, they went into Donegal on Saturday. Pat Cadden, their first choice goalkeeper last year, is gone. Mickey Jones, their sort of first choice man marker, wasn't there. Barry Mulrowan, sort of man of steel at wing half back, wasn't there. Owen Donnelly, their Ulster captain in the last Railway Cup, wasn't there. And for them to go up to Letterkenny and come from that was the biggest thing about it. They came from 8-3 down, which I think is the biggest sign of progress. And they get lambasted for maybe their style of football. There's no way in hell that they came from 8-3 down last year. Look at the Ulster final last year. They were set up absolutely plan A. Let's shut this game down. Let's keep this as tight as we can and maybe sneak it the way we did against Monaghan. Half an hour gone, it was 2-5 to 3 points, and the game was gone out the gate. And everybody in Clonus knew that day that there was no way back for Fermanagh because of the way they played. So they come from 8-3 down on Sunday to keep Donegal to 2 points in the last 40-odd minutes of the game and go on and win it and score, what did they score? 9 themselves. That's the real achievement in it. And I think that's a level of progress they've made under Rory Gallagher. Like, it might not be pretty, people might not love to watch it, but players sign up for winning football, and that's what Fermanagh are playing at the minute. It's winning them games. Look at some of the counties that have similar resources flying around in Division 4 this 10, 20 years. Fermanagh don't have any better resources than any of them, and yet they're consistently punching above their weight, and they're doing so again.
What was the difference, Carr, do you think, with regard, like when they went 8-3 behind, from say this time last year? What did he change? What has he brought in? Did they just kind of go for it a bit more? Because obviously they remained fairly tight at the back. But what was the difference for them, from an attacking kind of point of view?
Well, I suppose. Look, he structurally, defensively, it hasn't changed that much. I was up at their McKenna Cup game against Tyrone at the start of the year, and God, it was 2-2 at half time, and it was. I can't even describe how bad a game of football it was, and yet they were setting that end of their game in place, and they're very, very good at it. They suck teams into the middle and then they hit them. They sort of leave spaces there, like a Venus flytrap. They leave a space in the middle, and then the second the ball goes in there, 4 of them surround it and they batter the man and they take it off him and turn him over, and it's brilliant, from a defensive point of view to watch. But obviously they had to get better at the other side of the game. I think a big difference is, I suppose, look, they don't even have the attacking resources that they had last year. That's the thing about it. As I say, Seamus Quigley and Tomás Corrigan being gone are 2 big losses. Kieran Corrigan has put on a good bit of muscle over the winter and has, had played sort of corner forward almost as a foil to the Quigleys. He played corner forward for a couple of years. He's playing wing half back. He scored 4 points from play from wing half back at the weekend, which a massive boost for their attack. Aidan Breen is kind of that player that can play wing back, wing forward. He got a couple as well. They're just a fluid running team. They're getting there in terms of playing that style of football. Like they will at times have all 15 behind the ball, but they're much more fluid now on the counter attack than they probably were this time 12 months ago.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about Plan A and Plan B there, because that was very striking all right last year, that how early the Ulster final was really over as a contest because they didn't have a Plan B to go to. And Cian O'Neill was actually speaking a couple of weeks ago after Kildare went down to Fermanagh. It was a terrible game. It was very low scoring. But he was saying that they could identify what Fermanagh did. Fermanagh had their plan and Kildare could do nothing to actually counteract it, which at the time I thought was actually a failure of Kildare. But maybe I'm wrong here, Cahair. Maybe this is actually just Fermanagh's strength, that they've, instead of building up a Plan B, they've actually focused on Plan A. And as Johan Cruyff famously always said, is like, instead of turning to Plan B, make your Plan A better. And maybe Gallagher's gone down the same route.
Absolutely. He said, I remember talking to him before the Ulster final last year, and his quote was that, when he came in and found a group of players whose confidence was very low. The last year Pete McGrath's reign hadn't gone well. They weren't probably getting the best out of themselves at all. And he said, given the resources in Fermanagh, there are no great minor teams coming behind. There's not a great, an average of one Ulster final every 20 years has been their history, and they've never obviously won one in that time. So he said that it's really a 6, 7, 8 month project to get better. They maxed out on one gym session a week. because they wanted to focus on their tactical awareness, on getting the basic skills a bit better, and on the defensive end of the game and getting themselves organised again. So you're absolutely right that they have zoned in. Like Plan A, I mean, anybody who watches the Armagh and Monaghan games back from last summer that they played, you know, the Monaghan game, God, they didn't get enough credit for what a defensive masterclass that was that day. You know, they took everything that Monaghan had done against Tyrone, they unpicked it, and they set themselves up to be horribly hard to beat, and they did enough on the break. They probably did get a benefit of a few refereeing decisions in the first half, if I recall, and then they obviously get the fisted goal at the end. So there's wee bits of fortune that they're going to need when they're playing that style of football, but you have to put that against how far above their weight in terms of resources that they're punching, and you have to give it that context, and in that context they're doing an outstanding job.
We were speaking at the top of the show, Cahair, about a potential early Manager of the Year award when it comes to Gaelic football, and Rory Gallagher was in the conversation. We can actually bring up the current poll results. You can get it at Off the Ball on Twitter, and he is currently winning. He's on 36% of the vote. Second place is Mickey Graham with 24% of the vote, even though I said he should be out of the top four. Andy McEntee with 21% and Wayne Kieran's in fourth place at 19%. Moylesy, are you happy with those results?
I'll go with that,
represents your own view?
Yeah.
Before we'll come back to that and we'll give you the final result before the end of the show. Just before we let you go, Cahair, just a quick word on Tyrone against Monaghan. Big win for Tyrone at the weekend. I'm not sure, you might have been surprised about this one as well. Are they back on track now? Is that fair to say?
I think we need to see a couple more games from Tyrone to say that they're back on track, because of the fact that Monaghan were so far below their own standard on Saturday night. You know, it was so uncharacteristic of Monaghan. I'd be a wee bit concerned that Monaghan have just gone badly off the boil. They were 2 points against Galway over a long period of time with the wind was not a good return from them. They went up to Tyrone. For 20 minutes, Conor McManus looked like he might beat them on his own. He was outstanding, but the supply completely dried up after that. And Tyrone, to be fair to them, right from the very first minute, right from the very start, had looked a lot sharper and a lot more at it. They moved Matty Donnelly to full forward, which was a big point in the game. You know, he had been playing as a sweeper, well, at the start of this season and over the last couple of seasons. He had floated to full forward a couple of times over the last couple of years, but I think that they need that focal point in their attack. He gave them that. You know, in terms of, they didn't score, but in terms of their kick passing game, which, you know, people talk about them as a running team. Tyrone's kick passing game over the last 18 months has developed hugely.
Yeah.
And they're very, very good at it now. And Matty Donnelly and Cathal McShane have become the focal point of that winning ball. If they can get scores off that, like Peter Hart was outstanding sort of centre half forward. And so, look, Tyrone, they did the same last year. They had an awful start. They ended up finishing fourth in the league, comfortable enough, ended up in the All-Ireland final. So I think people writing them off were a bit premature after the first couple of games. But equally, I'd want another couple of games just to see exactly where they're at in terms of what they're doing. Yeah,
nice one, Cahair. We'll let you go and we'll chat to you soon. Thanks a million for that.
Thanks, man.
You actually said that exact thing a couple of weeks ago, that just chill out a little while. Tyrone did this thing last year.
Yeah. Well, they did it. It's carbon copy. You know, it's like they kind of take the first couple of games to try, well, let's try something completely different. All the while he knows he's got the certain individuals to just put back into the system and change it slightly. And that's all he has to do. I think the Matty Donnelly to full forward is a really good idea, by the way.
Yeah, it really is. It seemed to pay dividends for them at the weekend as well. Like, from a Monaghan perspective then, bit of a setback. Like, are you a little bit worried about them in terms of getting relegated from Division 1?
Yeah, like, I mean, they kind of, you know, people will look, they bet Dublin, but they got Dublin at a really good time. You know, that was a great time to get them. And, you know, where they got them, obviously at home. I would be worried. You know, that's the manner of the defeat of the weekend was the more worrying thing. Great start, McManus looked great, but then they were just shut down and it was like, okay, where do we go from here?
Right.
And I just don't see that. I don't see the threats.
Are they a bit of a plan A team as well?
I think they are, and I think a lot of teams can say, right, okay, more so with Tyrone, who can mix it up and who've got a lot of different pace and power coming from different areas, and who have obviously tried to add. You can see O'Neill's idea, like, he was very much an inside forward who had great vision and who could drift out and play balls, and I'd say that's kind of the role they're thinking of. Donnelly, sit inside, pick off balls, but then if needs be, just drift out and look to supply passes, which O'Neill used to do. I would be worried about Monaghan though. Yeah, I am. And it's not a nice place if they get relegated, because I think Ulster, again, with the Cavan, Donegal coming, Fermanagh coming, Tyrone, they're even improving, Armagh improving. Ulster's going to be very, very tight this year.
Yeah, it certainly is. We may get your take as well on Dublin Mayo before we wrap up a little bit later on.